Raider Nation. The Raiders have become the perfect get-right game for any team in crisis, and let me tell you, they are about to face a defending champion stumbling through their own issues who might try to use this matchup to bounce back, but there is one key factor that could absolutely swing this team toward a win. At the same time, the offense is under heavy debate and the veteran is being questioned. New faces are stepping up, and young guys are being thrown into the fire in pass protection. There is a big decision involving a key locker room piece, and the future is on the line, with the crowd in silver and black scoreboard watching and rooting against a bunch of other teams. But before we break down each one of these stories, let me ask you for a quick favor. Subscribe to the channel. It is completely free, and it helps a ton to keep this Raiders content alive. Drop a like, because that tells the algorithm to push this video to more fans in silver and black. And treat the comments like the stands on game day. Your opinion really matters here. Alright, let's dive into this first story because it hits straight at the heart of everyone who lives and breathes Raiders football. The mood is heavy. Every week turns into an invitation for another team to get right at our expense, and honestly, that wears you down. We came into the year expecting Pete Carroll's offense to play on the front foot, hoping all the new pieces would click, and instead it has been stumble after stumble. Firing Chip Kelly and Tom McMahon shook up the entire routine. Greg Olsen took over the offense in the middle of the fire. Patrick Graham's defense has been carrying way too much of the load, and the locker room vibe gets weird when everyone knows they need to respond and nothing really connects. The problem now is that here comes the Philadelphia Eagles, a wounded opponent looking for exactly the kind of game where they can get their identity back, and of course, that is where we show up on the schedule. Jalen Hurts is coming off a 5-turnover game under pressure, trying to clean up mistakes in every possible way. They roll in on a 3-game losing streak, hearing criticism from every direction. And the story of this Raiders season is that teams in turmoil keep finding a breather right when they run into us. It is tough to admit that. And to be honest with you, nobody can stand watching that same script play out again. The fans want to fight. They want effort. They want proof that there is still a core in this locker room that refuses to become just another statistic. Greg Olsen's play calling on offense has not taken off yet. 2 games, low production, conservative calls. You can understand a little of it because changing the person in charge of the system midseason messes with everything. But at the same time, no one in that room gets unlimited time to explain away bad results. Geno Smith feels that pressure. He knows he is playing for his future. The entire staff knows it. The roster feels it. And that creates a weird tension where every single snap feels like a trial. Patrick Graham's defense hangs on as long as it can, but there are no miracles when the offense cannot sustain drives and keeps that unit on the field exhausted. To make it worse, opponents have clearly figured out the pattern. They come in calm, knowing that if they stay patient and work against a tired coverage unit in the second half, the scoreboard will tilt their way. When the offense fails to respond, the game slides downhill fast. Even so, there is a narrow opening. This Eagles team loves to play down to struggling opponents. If there is a window to shock people, it is right there. But for that to happen, Geno, the entire offense, and that locker room have to take emotional control. Somebody has to pound their chest and say they are done being the team everyone uses as a springboard. And look, only the fans in silver and black up in the stands know how much that has been building up. It is time to show at least some kind of competitive pride. And before I forget, only here you get the raw viewpoint of someone who lives and breathes Raiders football. No filters, no corporate polish, just real talk from the stands. Now tell me what you think about this whole situation, because there is a lot to unpack. And stay with me, because we have an even heavier story coming up next. You know what makes this season even crazier? It is not just the final score every Sunday. It is watching the outside world treat the Raiders like a near-lost cause, dropping them to the bottom of every power ranking. Almost everyone around the league looks at this team as an automatic win on the schedule. After the loss to the Denver Broncos, the script felt familiar. Fast start. Offense disappears, defense stuck on the field forever, and the scoreboard gets away. But this time there was one big difference. When Geno Smith hurt his shoulder, Kenny Pickett came in, and in just a handful of snaps, he showed something we have barely seen all year: rhythm, quick reads, the ball coming out on time against a difficult defense. The numbers were not crazy, but the feeling was different. Over those 2 drives, the offense finally seemed to breathe. The ball went to areas of the field that had been ignored for weeks. Simple things, but organized. And on a team that keeps tripping over its own feet, that alone feels huge. Even Thomas Valentine over at Pro Football Focus highlighted the contrast in his grades. He had Pickett rated higher than Geno. The wild part is that even with that, a lot of people still pencil in the veteran as the safe choice. They talk about experience, they talk about what Geno did with the Seattle Seahawks, but to be honest with you, that does not erase the slow reads we have seen all year in Las Vegas. The guy who once looked like the definition of accuracy and fearless deep shots now looks stuck. He hesitates, holds the ball too long, and in a rebuilding offense that cost doubles. On the other side, Pickett arrives with the background of having played on big stages for the Philadelphia Eagles, but now he presents himself as a possible bridge to the future in silver and black. He puts the young weapons at the center of the conversation. Jack Beck, for example, was targeted more on those drives than in entire weeks with Geno. When a young player actually touches the ball, he plays differently, practices differently, and starts to see a new role for himself inside the franchise. And there is extra spice here. Pickett's first full game running the show as the starter should be against this loaded Eagles roster. If he goes out there loose and connects with these new weapons against his former team, the conversation about the future changes fast. Those rankings that bury the team near the bottom tell only part of the story. They do not show what it means for a roster to see a different spark at quarterback. Inside the building in Henderson, the pressure only builds. The coaching staff looks at these final games and asks who really deserves to lead this offense going forward. Do you cling to the past with Geno or accept the risk of a real test drive with Pickett, even if it hurts in the short term? And that is what makes this matchup against a much better opponent so interesting. The whole league might just see a heavy favorite on the other sideline, but anyone paying close attention knows there is a full-on experiment underway in these last few weeks. And how this offense performs could reshape the entire offseason plan. Keep that in mind because the next part of this story is all about how the team handles the young guys who are finally getting real snaps, starting with Caleb Rogers on the offensive line. There is another piece of this Raiders stretch that hits me hard. When you stop staring at the standings and start focusing on who is actually growing on the field, the story changes. It still hurts to see a season like this, but you can find a few sparks in the middle of the chaos. The situation is simple. Losses piling up, a patched-together roster, morale on the edge. Now we hit a final stretch where a lot of players know they are not playing for this season anymore. They are playing for their future spot. And this matchup against a powerhouse roster on the other side becomes a true stress test for the young guys who are finally getting real snaps. A contender lining up against what might be one of the weakest rosters in the league. On the offensive line, that reality is brutally clear. The unit has become the Achilles heel of the season. Injuries, improvisation, constant shuffling. When Jackson Powers Johnson went down, the team took a long time to put Caleb Rogers on the field. The rookie had to grind in practice, fix his technique, and only after a lot of work did he finally get a real shot. His first start came against a Denver Broncos front that loves collapsing the pocket over and over, and somehow Caleb held his own. He was not perfect, but he stayed out there from the first snap to the last. Pete Carroll himself said afterward that this alone is a win. Just getting through a physical front, surviving, and walking off the field knowing you competed changes your mindset. It gives you confidence and a real sense of belonging. Now comes the next step. Carroll has confirmed that Caleb Rogers will stay in the starting lineup against an even more physical Philadelphia Eagles front with a pass rush that punishes the smallest mistake. The assignment is brutal, but this is exactly the kind of challenge that speeds up development. Reps against that level of competition teach things no practice rep can. And to be honest with you, if this is going to be a lost year, it is better to take the lumps with a rookie who can grow from it. Let him get beat up, learn, and come back stronger, instead of watching the same issues repeat with veterans we already know. The best part is that this shift is not just talk. You can feel it in Carroll's comments when he explains how these young guys react once they hear they are actually going to play. Everyone who lives and breathes Raiders football knows how contagious that can be in the locker room. One player gets an opportunity, another sees his hope renewed, and it spreads. So this showdown against a much more polished roster stops being just a scheduled beating. It becomes a lab, a testing ground to see who deserves to be here when the franchise finally gets its house in order. It is a trial for Caleb and the entire line. It is also a test for the young targets on offense who are just starting to carve out a role, and for everybody trying to lock down a future spot. Hit the comments and tell me if you would rather live with mistakes from young players building their career here than watch the same old apathy from guys who are just passing through. And hang on to this, because in the next story, we tie this evaluation of the young core to the toughest decision of this whole stretch, right at the position that messes the most with the heads of fans in silver and black. What makes this end of the season even more delicate is the position that runs everything. When we talk about the future of the Raiders, there is no way around the quarterback, and that is where the tricky situation between an injured Geno Smith and an ascending Kenny Pickett comes in. This is not just about who starts on Sunday, it is about which path the franchise chooses. The script so far is very clear. A 2-11 record, a stalled offense, a defense dragging a piano up the hill every week. In the middle of that, Geno hurts his shoulder against the Denver Broncos and leaves the game. Pickett comes in, moves the offense, shows some moxie, and leaves a huge question hanging overhead. It is not just whether he will face the Philadelphia Eagles as the starter. It is what happens with him after that matchup. Pete Carroll has been straightforward when asked about Geno Smith's return. He said it all depends on how the shoulder responds to treatment. No public debate about performance, no manufactured controversy. If the shoulder is right, he is back. If it is not, he sits. On paper, it sounds simple. In reality, everyone knows that every snap Kenny takes now carries massive weight in the internal evaluation. On the outside, the message is all about protecting the player. Carroll talks about process, about taking care of the body, about respecting Geno Smith and what he has done. But to be honest with you, there is a part of this story that never reaches the podium. If Pickett lines up against the Eagles, plays loose, and looks more comfortable than Geno has all year, how do you pull him off the field without shaking the locker room? The offense feels it when the tempo changes. They feel it when the play calling fits better with what Kenny does well. They feel it when the ball comes out fast and the young receivers are fully involved. If that shows up again, if the offense keeps looking lighter with Pickett, the conversation inside the building shifts. And Geno feels that too. Players sense the room. At the same time, Kenny brings a different energy. He has played in big games, already lifted a trophy, but now he is trying to prove he can be more than just a late season stopgap. Against this physical Eagles defense, every well-built drive becomes another argument in his favor, especially if he keeps feeding Jack Beck and the rest of the young skill guys who need real snaps under fire to grow. In the end, the dilemma that lands on Pete Carroll's desk is easy to describe and hard to solve. Do you rush Geno back the moment the medical staff clears him in a season that is already buried just to respect the depth chart? Or do you accept the risk of sticking with Pickett and find out if he can be part of the future in silver and black? That decision hits the locker room, the front office evaluation, and even the way potential free agents view the Raiders. And that is why every move at this position stretches far beyond the 2025 season. In a year with only 2 wins, the smartest play is to use these games as a filter. Keep Geno Smith on the shelf as long as it makes sense. Give Kenny Pickett a real shot and live with the outcome. How this battle is handled will feed straight into the draft strategy, the offseason blueprint, and the confidence of this fan base in silver and black. There is one more thing that changes how a lot of people are watching the end of this Raiders season. Instead of only suffering through every failed third down, a lot of fans are now watching games with one eye on the standings. It is rough to say it out loud, but it is the truth. This team is fighting at the bottom, and that puts the crowd in silver and black in a weird spot. You pull for your own team, but you are also rooting against half the league. When you look at the direct rivals down there, everything becomes clearer. There is a head-to-head coming up with the New York Giants, a game that is almost like a championship for draft position. Before that, there is a full slate of results that could shake up the top of the order. And that is where the rooting guide starts for who the Raiders need to push away from their spot. The first name on the list is that Blue Giants team from New York. They are stuck in the same record hole as the Raiders, sitting at 2-11, and they are about to face the Washington Commanders without Jaden Daniels under center. That matchup is huge. If the Giants win that game, Las Vegas suddenly has a much clearer path to holding the top spot in the draft as long as this losing stretch continues. It feels strange to root that way, I know, but it makes a massive difference for the future. Next up is the group from Nashville, the Tennessee Titans. Maybe the biggest threat in this strange race. The Raiders already beat them this year, which helps in a potential tiebreaker, but they still have a brutal game against the San Francisco 49ers and a much more manageable one against the New Orleans Saints. For anyone who lives and breathes Raiders football, the ideal scenario is seeing that Titans team grab at least one more win. Pushing a direct competitor farther away in the standings has never been so important. Then there is the brown and orange team in the conference, the Cleveland Browns. The loss to the Browns already helps the Raiders hold their position, but the math says they still need at least one more win from that side. If Cleveland beats the Chicago Bears this week, they are almost out of the race for the very top of the draft. That opens even more room for Las Vegas to stay among the first picks, even if they do not win another game. In the middle of all this, the wildest part is that the franchise itself seems to have embraced the transition phase. Pete Carroll has started putting young players on the field for real. This is not just press conference talk. Shedrick Jackson heard from the coach that he would have a chance, felt that extra boost of confidence, and practiced even harder knowing Sunday would actually mean something. When he delivered, he became an example inside the locker room. These stories of rookies and young guys earning reps keep hope alive. They prove this season is not just a stack of losses. It is a laboratory to find out who can carry the shield in the future. And to be honest with you, in a season with only 2 wins, it makes a lot more sense to figure out who deserves to stay than to chase meaningless victories that only hurt draft position. At the end of the day, the weekly math still matters. Who wins, who loses, who climbs out of the basement. But what really counts is how this stretch reshapes the identity of the roster and this fan base in silver and black. Soon, it will not just be about who Raiders fans need to root against. It will be about what kind of franchise the Raiders want to become in the next few years. What is left after all this is not just a 2-win record. It is the feeling that the Raiders are standing at a crossroads. On one side, a young core getting snaps and a line being built the hard way. On the other, an injured veteran, a coaching staff under pressure, and a schedule pushing the franchise into a fight at the very top of the draft. Everyone who lives and breathes Raiders football knows it hurts right now, but also sees a rare chance to rebuild the right way. The question is simple and brutal. Is this group going to embrace the chaos, treat these weeks like a live experiment, and come out stronger, or fall back into the same old bad habits? Drop a comment. This space belongs to everyone who lives and breathes Raiders football. Just win, baby.